Alright, over the last hour we've seen a significant increase in fire activity on the Oak Fire, so I thought I'd go live for another update and forecast. Throughout this video we're going to see how that activity has picked up in the last hour. We're going to look at the fire from the satellite imagery. We're going to check out some of the recent events going on with this fire, the timeline throughout the day, as well as the recent evacuation orders. The current numbers, we're also going to look at where that growth was throughout the last couple days, where the growth was today, and then also where we are forecasting that growth to go in the future based on the fire weather forecast. Finally, we're also going to look at a smoke forecast to see what kind of air quality we can be dealing with. So we'll just get right started with what has been going on over the last hour. When I looked at this a couple hours ago, I was thinking, it doesn't look as bad as the last couple days, but then we did get this flare up right here. Overall, I'd say it still doesn't look as active as the last 2 days, but right here you can really see where we start punching through that inversion right there. Clearly a lot of heat being generated, and as we'll see in the watch duty timeline, this did generate some spot fires, so we'll have to see where those spot fires might have dropped and what might be happening to those. But if we want to look at this satellite from space, right there you notice not as much smoke as we were getting on this fire over the last 2 days, but then it's just at the very end of this video you start to see that puff of smoke really come up. It's kind of hard to see, so I'll zoom in here. Again, moderate growth and activity throughout the day, and then right there it starts to punch through that inversion. Now, if we want to check out the timeline, at 1:26 p.m. we had some new evacuation orders, and then at 6:38, that's where we got the report of this significant increase in fire activity. It says along the southeastern edge of the fire, east of Jerseydale Road along Footman Ridge. So we'll also pull in the Google Earth imagery later to see if we can actually identify where this spot might have been. Now, per radio traffic, flare up through about half a dozen spot fires across the ridge, that being Footman Ridge, that copters and tankers are working, but the main body of the fire is holding within their lines currently. So that's overall kind of some good and bad news there. The bad news is that flare up did toss up some spot fires. The good news is, though, that the main fire, which is where the majority of the heat and energy is holding within the lines, and that's honestly exactly what we want to hear. And then fire is now mapped at 5,603 acres, and that was just updated about 6 minutes ago, so we have the most recent information that we can possibly work with here. Now, before I go any further, I do just want to point out that again, there were some new evacuation orders, so I put the link in the description of this video for the evacuation map. Never look at this video and think this is what's currently going on, because they might have changed by the time you're watching this video. Always better to click the link itself, and then if you are in one of those orders, definitely evacuate immediately, because we have seen a lot of activity on this fire. Now, when it comes to the most recent numbers, again, just updated a few minutes ago, it is now up to 15,603 acres, and it is 0% contained. Now, something else that we can do here is go down and look at the resources assigned. 17 helicopters, that's way up from yesterday. 225 engines, that's up as well. 58 dozers, 23 water tenders, 2,093 personnel, and 51 crews. I don't know if when we did the update yesterday, if they maybe hadn't updated this section in a while, but that is a massive increase from the numbers that we were looking at yesterday. You could just go back in my channel and look at yesterday's video if you want proof of that. Especially the personnel, actually every single one of these categories way up from yesterday. So that's some very good news. What's kind of good and bad news? The bad news is that we have had 5 structures damaged, 10 structures destroyed. The good news is that hasn't come up significantly from yesterday. So that kind of goes along with what we're seeing right here, that the main body of the fire is holding within their lines currently. Again, always a big disclaimer on these videos. I'm only as good as the information I can collect. I have about 20 different links where I try to find as much information as I possibly can, and then I try to present it to you guys in the best way possible. So Again, I'm doing my best with the information we have, but I would say it sounds like today was a lot better than the last couple days, just given all the different indications that we have to work with here. Now, when it comes to the growth over the last couple of days, it's actually easier to look at this on Google Earth. We can also kind of get our bearings. I noticed somebody commented that yesterday that it'd be helpful to point out some of the spots around this fire instead of just showing the map, because otherwise we don't really know what we're looking at here. So we'll just zoom in. There's Mid Pines right there. We have 140. That's on kind of the northwestern section of the fire. We have Dara on the southeastern section. And then the spot that I've been watching the closest throughout this entire fire is Jerseydale. Now, the reason I've been watching Jerseydale the closest throughout this fire is you can actually tell why by looking at this map right here. That yellow color is where the growth was 2 days ago. That red color was where the growth was yesterday. So you can actually see where most of the growth was clearly toward the northeastern section of this fire. And then you also notice that we had a couple spots in here where we were seeing this report yesterday where they had some dozer lines in, but then because of those southwesterly winds, picks up a little burning ember, drops it over the dozer lines, starts a little spot. Now, what's going to be interesting is when the new data comes out for the growth that we had today to see how much the fire has continued to extend. Based on the maps that we're going to look at in a second, it does look like the growth has continued towards the northeast, but I haven't seen any indications that it's had extreme growth towards the northeast or any significant loss of structures. So let's just hope that lack of information is in fact true for what's going on. But I do just want to zoom into Jerseydale here. So there's the fire, there's that spot fire. We can zoom in, we've got Scott Road right there. Looks like we have Moonrise Lodge, and then I notice more structures as we go farther in right here. And then we could possibly just turn it around and see where that fire is in comparison to those structures. So that's the reason that we're mostly concerned with Jerseydale right now, is because the growth has mostly been in this direction. But with all indications, it sounds like they have been holding it fairly well. Now, if we want to go to this map, this also tells you kind of where the most recent growth has been with this fire. That's the previous fire perimeter. And then where you see those red dots, that's where the satellite is picking up some new heat. So it looks like same exact kind of growth today that we had throughout the day yesterday, mostly towards the northeast. Now, one thing I will point out, the satellite imagery is not perfectly accurate where it shows these hotspots. So just because the hotspots extend all the way out here, it doesn't actually mean that the fire has extended all the way out there. But just zooming in there, this almost looks like the fire map. Not sure what's totally going on there. It looks like when we zoom in, the fire map changes a little bit. Not sure if that's just a glitch. So we're going to try out this different map to see if it looks any better. So there we are with the Oak Fire again. The reason I like this map is the red dots show you where the most significant activity is. And looking at that flare-up, it said it was fire activity along the southeastern edge of the fire east of Jerseydale Road along Footman Ridge. Now, I'm just going to try something in real time here. I've never actually tried this before, but let's just see if we can search Footman Ridge and figure out where it is on the fire. Well, that just worked perfectly. All right, so that looks like it's this ridge line right here, which is where we had that spot fire. Given the direction of the winds, I would guess that the spot was right about here. Let's see if we can piece together a little more of that information. So, Jerseydale Road, I think they gave more details on that spot. Flare up through about half dozen spots across the ridge. That copters and tanks are working, but the main body of fire is holding the line currently. So fire east of Jersey-Dale. All right, just coming back here. There's Footman Ridge right there, zooming out. So the spots are most likely right around here. So if we come back to Cal Topo, that's most likely around right there where, yeah, looks like that's where the most of those red dots are, which represent where the more recent heat activity is, or the most intense heat activity. Good news is not all that much going on the entire western side of the fire, so it really has been due to those winds pushing this fire up towards the northeast. Now something else we can do on this map is check out the fire history, because, actually I want to turn off fire activity for a second. Notice there's the 2013 Karstens fire right there. Doesn't really seem like that burn scar helped us out all that much, although you never know, just because the perimeter's out here doesn't mean everything has burned within the perimeter, so maybe there is an area right there that didn't have as much activity because of that burn scar, but what we're watching is what's going to happen as it starts to bump into the Ferguson burn scar right here. Now the reason that we're watching that is a lot of times fires will piece together almost like a puzzle piece, because where you had a fire in the past, it clears out a lot of the vegetation, and then there's just not as much fuel for that fire to continue. For example, we had the Briceburg fire in 2019. Right when it started bumping into the Ferguson fire, it just stopped in its tracks. The other reason is sometimes they're able to reuse containment lines. So that's what we're hoping on the Ferguson fire, although with a major caveat. If we zoom in here, I'm going to just turn off fire activity for a second. If we turn on the structures here, you notice that Jersey-Dale and a lot of those structures are between the Oak Fire and the Ferguson fire in 2018. So we certainly don't want it to turn into a puzzle piece right there, but based on the information that we've found throughout the day, it does sound like the lines that they made to protect these structures are in fact holding. But last I heard, there were still over 2,000 structures threatened by this fire. So that's a pretty messy map right there, so we're just going to clean it up by looking at WRF S Fire. This is the model that we run out of the San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory. And this is what the model was predicting throughout the day today. Those winds shift around in the afternoon, and then it starts to push that fire towards the northeast, and that is exactly what we ended up seeing. So the model did fairly well today. I'll actually back this up because it's a perfect visualization of how winds affect wildfire. So just going right here, you notice the wind arrows right there, and that's just pushing the fire forward. You get these little fingers. And then one thing that this model doesn't have is spotting, which is where it picks up the burning embers, drops them. But that's actually something that we are currently working on at San Jose State. And then interesting that it actually picked up that flare-up around, not exactly in the right place, but did pick up some more action happening on that southeastern side of the fire around 7 or 8 o'clock tonight. So that's interesting as well right there. Now when it comes to the fire weather forecast, let's check out Monday. This is actually the first I've looked at it as well. Number one variable we always look at is relative humidity. And at first glance, yeah, it's still extremely dry out there tomorrow. Anytime you have relative humidity below the threshold that I identified in my research where large fire growth days become much more likely is 17% relative humidity. So anytime I see something below that, it means one of your ingredients for a large fire growth day is there. Now we can also check out temperature. Another warm day in the low 90s, and then also wind gusts look to be very similar to what they were the last couple of days, coming from that southwesterly direction again, which once again is going to try to push that fire towards the northeast. So overall, I would say the fire weather forecast still isn't as bad as that first day when we had really gusty winds in the afternoon around 30 miles per hour, but it's still gusty enough to be able to get those spot fires, and it's still hot and dry enough with a lot of dead fuels and some steep topography as well to lead to another active day of fire. So that is what we should be expecting tomorrow, but hopefully all of those lines that seem to have been holding throughout the day today continue to hold tomorrow. So I'm just going to reload this, see if we can get it working. It seems like every time I do one of these videos, the air quality map decides to go out. So we'll try this one instead. So there's the fire down on the bottom of the screen. Just trying to figure out where the smoke is going. We've had, for the most part, an onshore flow throughout the state of California, at least on the central coast over the last couple of weeks. So that's keeping a lot of the smoke out of the Central Valley and the Bay Area. If we want to look at the air quality though, right now, very poor air quality around Tahoe. Looks like it's getting into the very unhealthy category. Around the fire itself, looks like it's unhealthy for sensitive groups. And then if we look at the forecast for tomorrow, looks like Tahoe is in that unhealthy air quality, and the Bay Area is in that moderate range. We'll have to stay tuned on that though, because how the air quality ends up being is very largely dependent on what the fire ends up doing. So just the basic summary of what we just learned about the Oak Fire in Mariposa County. We did have that flare up in the last hour that created some spot fires. We're going to have to stay tuned to see exactly what happens to those spot fires. The fire is officially at 15,603 acres, still 0% containment. But some of the good news is that we did sound like the lines were holding throughout the day today. The bad news is that tomorrow we're still in the low 90s. We have very dry conditions. There's clearly still a lot of fuel out there. And those afternoon wind gusts will pick up once again. So I will be back here hopefully tomorrow. Usually Mondays are my day off because I do 4 shifts over the weekend at KSBW. But given the nature of this fire and that it is the biggest one that we've seen this year, I should be back tomorrow afternoon for another update and forecast where we'll continue to follow this fire, not only figure out where it is now, but where it is likely to go in the future. So I hope this video is helpful, and thanks for watching.